Dzień dobry. My name is General Comrade Manfredny Erychenyov, and I worked for KGB in Soviet Union. And I must tell you that I was working on secret plan to conquer America. The way we were going to do that is to infiltrate America with Russian spies pretending to be Pennsylvania Dutch. Now I will read to you in a thick Pennsylvania Dutch accent the history of them Pennsylvania Dutch. And I am reading from the English Pennsylvania Dutch dictionary. And here we go. Who Are the Pennsylvania Dutch by Anne Hark, author of Hex Marks the Spot. Away back in the year 1681, why, there spread along the reaches of the Rhine River in Europe a strange rumor. In a distant land across the sea, an Englishman named Billy Penn had just received a princely grant of land, greater than all Bavaria and Württemberg and Baden put together. To that land now he was inviting the peoples of the Rhine, those peoples who for decades past had cowered miserably beneath the heel of a succession of invaders. Hardly a kingdom or a principality that hadn't felt the cruel impact of war. Its homes laid wasted, its rich fields ravaged, its inhabitants subjected to relentless persecution. To these now the rumors spreading far and wide seemed unbelievable. For William Penn, that tall young Quaker, who 4 years before he had visited the Rhineland, was preaching views not very different from those held by some of their own sex, was offering them a haven in America. Their land was plentiful, he said, and peace abode, and each man worshipped God as he saw fit, according to his own conscience, and not that of another, under laws in whose dictating everybody had a hand. Almost at once the invitation was accepted, by small groups at first, then gradually by ever-swelling numbers, till in 1776 almost one half the residents of Pennsylvania hailed from German states. From the Palatinate, that fertile pocket of the Upper Rhine, come the majority of immigrants to land at Philadelphia, then spread fan-wise throughout the valleys of the Susquehanna River and the Schuylkill River, up and down the Lehigh and the Perkiomen valleys. And today in Lancaster and Berks and Snyder counties, in Northampton, York and Lehigh, in Monroe and Bucks and Lebanon and Schuylkill, and still other sections, the descendants of them sturdy pioneers are known as the Pennsylvania Dutch. They brought with them, those hardy seekers after peace, a background and culture that has played no meager part in shaping and enriching life as it is known today. Among them, in outstanding numbers, came the farmer folk, who knew good land by instinct and made straight for walnut-dotted limestone valleys, where the dark, rich soil soon yielded produce in abundance to fill up and overflow their big Swiss barns. But with them, too, came artisans and scholars, potters, printers, lawyers, weavers, turners, ministers, and gunsmiths, men from every walk of life, proficient in the occupations that they called their own. They brought their Bibles with them too, and their deep religious feeling, and their music that was part of everyday devotion in their churches, schools, and homes. But, paramount among the rest, they brought their love of colour and of decoration, of hearts and birds and tulips painted in bright blues and earthy reds and brilliant greens, of animals and suns and moons and stars and trees of life, and other naive symbolism dating back into the past. Here in a new and freer land, with different media and tools not always adequate, they set down once again the old familiar themes, on barns and birth certificates, on tombstones, chairs, and pottery, on dower chests and butter molds, on stove plates, clocks, and almanacs, in lovely fraktur painting, on rare manuscripts and ancient song books, all those quaint and charming objects that today are the collector's pride and joy. They brought they brought their love of hearty eating with them also, and that hospitality which finds its outlet in a table well surrounded by stout trenchermen and covered solidly with palate-tickling food, with Schnitz and Knepp and Panhas, with Schmierkäse and Buberschenkel, with geschmelzte noodles, chicken corn soup, and potato filling, and other rare delights too numerous and tantalizing to recount. A favorite decorative element, the bird known as the Distelfink, is a dialect rendition of, in English, thistlefinch. They brought their superstitions with them too, entwined with their religions, and just as their rich learning and their farming skill, their love of eating and their craftsmanship still linger on today, so also among some of their descendants strange beliefs and occult practices still play a motivating part. They have their powwow doctors, these more credulous among the Pennsylvania Dutch, who say words over them to heal their wildfire, who point out the witches that verhex them, who recover objects lost or stolen, or as we say, verloren or gestohlen, and supply unfailing remedies to cure disease and ward off evil spells. They have their sixth and seventh books of Moses, their Egyptian secrets of Albertus Magnus, and their long-lost friend by John George Hochman, filled with mystic recipes and incantations that correct or keep away all ills that plague the hapless soul of man. They have their Himmelsbriefe to ensure divine protection, their Erzspiegel to divulge the whereabouts of buried treasure, their bright painted symbols, stars and flowers, suns and moons and teardrops, swastikas and crosses, decorating big red barns to act as potent stumbling blocks for hexen. But underneath these childish theories, there's a strain of pure religion lurking, that inherent earmark of the Pennsylvania Dutch. It's seen in quaintest and most picturesque expression in the plain sects, Amish, Dunker, Mennonite, United, Christian, River Brethren, Yorker, and the rest, whose sober garb and simple way of living still persist despite the pitfalls and temptations of a modern world. Non-swearing, non-resistance, and non-litigation. This was the threefold rock on which the churches took their stand in the beginning, and most of them still cling to it today. And though their tenets vary on such minor themes as the propriety of sitting under other preachers, the details of the baptismal rite, and finer points of dress, they still stand close together on the all-important platform of remaining strictly plain instead of gay. Plainest of all, perhaps, are the Haas Amish, who, unlike their less austere first cousins, the Church Amish, go through life without such worldly aids as autos or electric lights. They who close their coats and vests with hooks and eyes, their bodices with pins instead of buttons, who frown on churches as a form of vanity and worship in their barns and houses instead, but whose wide lands and teeming acres placed them first among the country's most expert tillers of the soil, scholarly leaders. In other fields as well, this Pennsylvania Dutch proclivity to take the lead and keep it has been proved throughout the years. I would have said had been proven. The list of firsts for which them early settlers and their staunch descendants can be held responsible for seems almost without end. Why? It was a Pennsylvania Dutchman, Francis Daniel Pastorius, the leader of that tiny band of Mennonites who founded Shermantown, who wrote the first original scientific work in this new land. And that same gentleman, plus several others of his scholarly and serious bent, you might say they were bent, was first to voice a public protest against slavery, antedating by a century and 3/4 the Emancipation Proclamation. The first paper mill was built by William Rittenhouse, whose great-grandson grew up to be the first astronomer of note in our New World. The printing of the famous Martyr Book was done by a Pennsylvania Dutchman in the cloister settlement at Ephrata, the most extensive literary triumph of the colonists, while from the Sauer Press in Shermantown came the first German Bible in this country, part of an impressive output by the Pennsylvania Dutch that put to shame all other efforts of pre-revolutionary days. In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Dutch established the first boarding school for girls in all the colonies, and later the first drugstore and the earliest waterworks. In Mannheim, Baron Stiegel, that quaint Dutchman with a flair for showing off, who drove about the countryside in coach and four, accompanied by outriders and a pack of baying hounds, and heralded by roaring guns, turned out fine glassware of a quality unequaled then in the country or now. And in the same rich county, Lancaster, hard-working wheelwrights fashioned the first Conestoga wagons, with their boat-shaped bodies and the bows of chiming bells. Those wagons which, beginning as farm vehicles, soon started rolling far and farther from the native soil until at last, as inland freighters bearing mammoth loads of fruit and grain, of whiskey, oil and iron, cider, pottery, tobacco, they were linking east with west. And just as all these Pennsylvania Dutch of Germanic origin was leaders in the days of peace, so also when the Revolution came, they took their places in the foremost ranks of war. At Cambridge, when George Washington sent out his call for riflemen, why, a company of Pennsylvania Dutchmen from Berks County were the first to answer, followed just a little later by a second company from York. The rifles that they carried were another contribution to America's expanding craftsmanship, for it was immigrants from Germany who brought the art of rifling with them, and who made in Pennsylvania those far-reaching weapons that gained fame beneath the totally misleading title of Kentucky Rifles. It was Pennsylvania Dutchmen, too, who were responsible in large part for the Continental Army's weathering of that crucial winter in the snows of Valley Forge. The broad, fertile fields to north and west of camp were owned by farmers who spoke English with a Pennsylvania Dutch accent, and these men it was who drove their Conestoga wagons, loaded down with rich supplies, unerringly through hostile lines, evading capture and delivering them in safety to the ragged, starving troops in buff and blue. And when at last the war was over, when the rifles and great iron cannon manufactured from ore unearthed in Pennsylvania, the gunpowder made with sulfur and saltpeter dug in York, the cannonballs and bullets cast in forges owned and run by German patriots were laid aside, the men who rode the final miles with Washington to the Potomac were the Pennsylvania Dutchmen of his bodyguard. Well, that's the story of the Pennsylvania Dutch. And now I will switch back to my Russian accent, because in Russia we wanted to, in day of communist Soviet Russia, we wanted, take a look, we wanted to infiltrate the America. We Soviet spies disguised as Pennsylvania Dutchmen. And now we close with a prayer said in the rich accent of the American South. May God bless you real good.